Today is Wednesday, April 19th, and we are discussing Dedicated to the Dead by Tova Reich. So let me show you what she looks like. That's my MO, to look at her. I think she's super attractive. She's 80. And I was talking to my girlfriend, and she said she's read everything she's written and really enjoys her.
Oh, wow.
Do you like this friend?
I do.
I think she's a good writer, but
Right.
I didn't understand the back and forth and whatever.
Okay. So a couple things that I want to say at the Dedicated that I wanted to talk about. First of all, and I found this, but when I read this, it made it clear to me. So she has a book, My Holocaust, and I'm reading this out of order, but the novel was published in 2007. It's a satire on the commercialization of Holocaust remembrance.
Oh my God. I said that to Judy last night.
Yes.
Did I not?
Yes. And you didn't even Google it. Good
I
job.
didn't Google it. I wrote commercialism.
Listen, with Jewish educators, we always say there's no business like the Shoah business, because I do a program on Shoah. I have a full house, and everyone comes up to me, oh, we should do this again. And I do it once a year, and it's always popular. Alice, thank you for your lovely thank you note. But, for me, I had a very long discussion with a good friend, and he said, well, if I could only teach one thing, I'd teach the Holocaust. I'm like, no, we have to give our kids some hope and something positive to hang on to. All right, going back to the story, My Holocaust focuses on the slaughter of 6 million Jews during the 1930s and 40s. Reich uses a clear strategy to attract attention after reams of genuine or sanctimonious tears have drowned many people's capacity to feel real grief. And also they say that Dedicated to the Dead, and there's other stories, the Page Turner third generation, are animated. Oh, wait, Joyce is here. Are animated by the long-term fallout from the Holocaust, generational trauma, abuse of memory, competitive victimization, and more. In the midst of all of this is the story. The House of, we didn't read that. The novelist, the novelist Howard Norman said, few contemporary writers are truly original. Tova Reich is one of them. Read this book and discover her satiric genius. And I'll never forget, and I think as Americans, we experienced this at 9/11, that it took a long time for TV to come back online, Saturday Night Live. And I remember, I like Saturday Night Live, and they came back and they had like a policeman's choir. They didn't do it funny. And, there's certain things that are, what's the word? There's a word, sacred, right? Sacred cows, but sacred that you can't touch. And I saw an Israeli comedy troupe, and they had done, I thought, a very hilarious thing about how the Israelis, when they hung Eichmann, and it's a farce. And they don't know how to tie a noose, and then the platform's too high, too low. Anyway, I saw them in person. I said, is there anything that you can't make fun of it in Israel? And she said, not the Holocaust, but it's the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, that they cannot, that's, you can't touch that there. So I think that certainly as Jews, and even how the Holocaust has permeated our, just the general public. Seinfeld, which really, I think, showed Judaism to everyone in America, he had the soup Nazi. You know, like you use Nazi, and even the right wing, and this is Vanessa speaking, not McColl's Lakeside, the right wing, calls people Nazis, and, we call them Nazis, but it's something that is still in our, it's in our vernacular. And, even on Sunday, we had a survivor, for those, and I can send you the video because I do have it. And she got out in 37. And someone came up to me, I won't say, afterwards and said, she's not a survivor. And over the years, the definition of what a survivor is, if you were on the kinder transport, if you had to hide, it's not just, and this woman said to me, she goes, I thought we were going to hear somebody from the camps. And that's not, the resistance, hiding out and fighting with the Polish people. Every experience is different. And she was 97 years old. Kanahora 222. I had like a chair ready to go. She said, no, I want to stand. And she was amazing. And, each year we're going to have fewer and fewer of these survivors as they die. And I think certainly my children, they have seen a lot of survivors. I don't know if my grandchildren will, but they'll hear the story. And it's important, obviously, for us to tell the story. So, getting back to the story, the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about was the name Gilguli.
I looked that up.
I did too.
I did too.
What did you find? And then I'll tell you what I think.
It's the concept of cycle and survival and coming back and re-going, and that. I had a really hard time with this because I adored my great-grandfather, and he talked about, he had 12 brothers and sisters. And my great-grandmother, who he married, had 12 brothers and sisters. And I have a really hard time with someone wanting to go through the ashes at these places. I struggled. I really struggled with this story.
The other thing, and I'll get to a few of you in a second, in Israel, there are not many cities with subways because you can't dig down. They're all on, you find all these archaeological finds. There's one in Haifa, but digging down in Israel is just fraught with what was there. How do you excavate it? How do you archaeological dig it? Lynn and then Terry.
I got to the point in the story where the satire wasn't funny anymore. It got to the point that I thought he was pointing out inhumanity to man and obscene obscene use of Judaism as a mockery. I mean, I thought there was commercialism was apparent, but I think there's so much more to the story than that. I think this guy is actually on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He is trying to find out who he is. What is a Jew? I mean, he hasn't been a Jew. What is a Jew? And the picture she shows us of what a Jew is, to me, was horrifying.
It's grotesque.
Really, I mean, he goes from the putting on the trap. I mean, he's trying out, to me, putting those clothes on is trying to find out what it is. What are the trappings of Judaism? And so those clothes and the thing, but he's ostentatious in his presentation, which shows me there's that stereotype of Jews being consumers, but conspicuous consumers.
Is he Jewish?
Well, that is the question. I wrote all over, what is a Jew? Is he Jewish? I mean, other people did not think of him because he was of his external appearance, but that's not how we judge what a Jew is. I mean, it's the internal character of the person that makes him Jewish. To me, my feeling is that this was a journey piece of literature. He's filled with illusions about Judaism and religion. I felt a great mockery of religion in general as being irrelevant. And on page 266 to me is the heart of what the story's about. But he becomes disillusioned. He's filled with illusions. At the end, he's disillusioned. And he goes into this tunnel and he goes into a fetal position. And then maybe he needs to be reborn again into someone else. I don't know.
I didn't
thought
think
it was,
about that as the birth canal.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought it was so depressing. I can't even, it's supposed to be funny and I did laugh. But-
Terry and then Judy.
Well, just before I make my comment, at one point it even talks about the birth canal and the death canal. I mean, it's actually spelled out. So I think that is definitely the birth canal. But I looked up Gilgul, and there were a lot of different iterations of definitions. And one was the belief by Isaac Luria of transmigration of souls, which is seen whereby souls could continue their task of self-perfection. And I don't think we're ever given any idea of why Jack Gallagher decides to be Jewish. I mean, it just right off the bat, he realizes that in a previous life he was Jewish. So obviously he feels he's been reincarnated. But we don't really know why, because from that point on, we just are hearing about his journey. And I looked up some of the places. Belzec was one of the killing centers. There was Sobibor and Belzec and Treblinka. And
So there was tons and tons. And I think what you need to know is that there were work camps in Germany, but the death camps, I mean, Auschwitz also was a work/death camp. They put all of those in Poland, but Majdanek, Treblinka, and some of these people, they weren't tattooed. And it says that in there because they.
Well, that's the thing. She said to him, or somebody said to him, if you're looking for your tattoo, you have to go to Auschwitz, because they were too much in a hurry to kill them to even bother with tattoos. And the term that came up, the tube, I had to look up because I was not familiar with that. And his girlfriend, what is her name? Kashka, the Polish girlfriend.
Yeah.
She really was a piece of work. The part that she goes into it towards the end is so disgusting. It's really difficult to read. But she's talked about as a child, they played doctor and they played the tube. And the tube was the place where the Jews went on the way to the showers, where they were eventually gassed. And it was, she made, she talked about it so lightly, as though this was just, and then the worst on 276, the Germans at least are a cultured nation, civilized. At night after a hard day's work, they'd sit down like members of the human race to listen to classical music played by the orchestra of Jewish prisoners, Schubert, Beethoven. Sometimes we could hear it too when it wasn't being drowned out by one of their drunken orgies. But hey, who'd begrudge them a little relaxation? They were a long way from home after all, and they missed their mamas and their pretty little Shatsies and their dog Putzi. All day long, they were killing themselves, processing Jews with only Ukrainians for company, whipping, beating, torturing, shooting, unloading the cattle car. In other words, they were so exhausted from all this stuff. And it was, and at the very end, oh my God, it wasn't so easy dragging those Jews out of the gas. Wait. I got a phone call. Could you hear me? I don't know if you could still hear me.
Yeah, we can hear
at the
you.
end, it said it wasn't so easy dragging those Jews out of the gas chambers. That's what everyone said. They were frozen solid, whole families stuck together. You could tell them apart. Even in death, they were still holding hands. I mean, this is the most gruesome. I mean, I don't know how everyone felt. I just felt it was almost difficult to even read the words on the page.
When I came to the name Gilguli, I didn't look it up because I know that in Hebrew, it's galgal is a wheel, and you turn
Yeah.
in a circle. And Simcha, our Hebrew tutor in Israeli, so we had a long discussion, and I had never thought about this, but Elaine, I'll get to you. That we, when you take out the Torah, you have Hagba, you lift it up, and then you have Galila, which is you dress it, and that's to transform. And we talked about this transforming of life with, this guy. Elaine.
Okay, if, I'm sure most of you have been to one or more of the camps. If you go, the town is right there, the people live there. I think one of the things that was so horrifying about this book or this story was that it was so real, that the people in the town knew. And this is what I think we as Americans, or people who live in Highland Park who have not been touched by this kind of horror, found it so awful. And I think now that I realize what's going on in this story, I wouldn't go back and reread it because I found it very disturbing. But I think she is actually a very realistic writer.
Oh my God.
And I think that we have to realize.
Right. I really want to go read one of her novels, but I don't know, not necessarily this Holocaust one. Okay. Merle, then Lynn, then Judy. Wait a minute. Unmuting you. Okay, go, Merle.
When I was reading it, I was thinking, I have seen some comedies about Hitler, and I was thinking about the comedies that I had seen, and I had seen The Producers, Inglorious Bastards, Jojo Rabbit.
Right.
After that, there were 27 comedies about Hitler and 36 other movies that spoofed Hitler that weren't necessarily comedies, going way back to 1940. But I thought, I have never read anything that satirized death camps.
I know.
The idea of building the memorial over this hallowed ground where you still have men. In the United States, my sister-in-law is an archaeologist. And before you build anything, you have to go through a process of excavating the land to make sure there are no human remains of Native Americans or artifacts that belong to Native Americans. And she had an entire business that lasted like 30 years doing this in the United States. And yet a rabbi was in charge of this project and said, well, if you see any human remains, just throw them over there.
Right. Wait, listen, that rabbi, whether it's some religious guy, it's not someone who was from HUC or JTS or someone who we would call a rabbi in America. And some of those guys, I say, they call themselves rabbi.
Okay, because that was so offensive. And the fact that this man had an obsession, I thought he was a Gentile who felt survivor's guilt for Jews. And so he tried to become a Jew. And the fact that he went to a tattoo parlor in Israel and got those numbers tattooed, it was a kind of obsession for him. But I thought she was original in that she went beyond making a comedy about Hitler to the actual death camps. And I thought it was shocking and horrible. But I guess from a writer's point of view, she did something original.
You said something that reminded me of, it'll come back to me. Judy and then Lynn.
My mother was blonde and blue-eyed. And after the war, she told me many stories where people didn't think she was Jewish and how she heard other people's opinions of Jews. I will tell you that I was so horribly offended to think that this writer would assume that there was a look to being Jewish, that we are one people. We wear this, we wear that, we wear this, we do this, and that's it. And I was offended by her premise.
Well,
Can I answer that?
yeah, Lynn, go.
Okay. You have to understand that this author is being satirical. These are not her views. She is twisting reality. And I have to keep telling myself that, or I would say this writer has really gone over the line. But she has gone, as we're talking, I'm thinking she has gone so over the line for me that she thought that would make the point more than anything. And any other story I've read, unfortunately, it made me not very happy about religion and about the clergy. I mean, it pushed me to another level.
Mhm.
But this is what she is saying people think of Jews, and we better be careful about these kind of stereotypes. This section you guys are referring to on 272 was the tipping point for me when this rabbi told him to ignore, not to intercede if there's violence against protesters, or keep your eyes. And he said it's a mitzvah to be a bystander. This is not Judaism. We are taught to be active, to intercede, to cure the world, to bring peace and love. And she has, as I said in the beginning, turned everything backwards. I mean, everything that you read there is the opposite of what a Jewish rabbi would say.
Right.
So I'm not sure if this woman, how she feels about Judaism, or she is disillusioned about religion and what it provides people. I think in the whole story, she has made religion irrelevant and unresponsive to people's suffering. And I think that's what you see in this story. And if you look on page 266, he's going on a journey to find out what it is to be a Jew. And I think he has come to this realization on his own. And it's on the first paragraph in the top. The holy man, Gilguli told himself, would have taught that tragedy and atrocity, suffering and death are fermenting just below the surface everywhere, leaving no trace, offering no meaning wherever there was once life, and Gentiles too may be considered a life form. Himmelach might have glossed also God's creatures, whether we like it or not, never mind if they saw fit to classify Jews as subhuman, in a sense forgiving the Nazis for, Jewish blood as racially inferior, Jewish life as unworthy of life. So, I mean, that's my takeaway. It could be, totally different. There's so many different topics here.
I think I agree with you. I'll have to dig down, and I'm going to see my friend this afternoon, but Judy, go ahead. All right, Judy, you went. The other thing I wanted to share with you, he was talking about, wearing this white outfit. And he, and that's just an approximation of what it could look like, and coming in on a donkey, that
Right.
is Messianic Jesus. And, again, I know it was satirical, but I don't know if he thought he was going to save everyone. And they do make it very clear he had long blonde hair, and you don't look Jewish, and the whole looks Jewish type of thing. So, I think that is a significant point for her. And I think as moderns in 2023, if somebody did that, they wouldn't do it in America, but sitting in Tel Aviv, if you saw someone like that, you'd think he's crazy.
Yeah.
You would not give him credence for whatever mission that he's on. I have taught kids these many years, and they're like, why doesn't God talk to us anymore? Why doesn't God talk to all these people in the Bible? Why don't they talk to us? So and Rabbi Sarada and I have talked about this. If someone came in and said, God told me, we would be like, okay, here's some numbers you can call. We would think that person is crazy. So I think that was, I think she was trying to get that out. Lynn.
Vanessa, I want to piggyback on what Terry said about why he went on, what prompted all of this in him. And his girlfriend, Bathsheba, started sort of prompting him because he was having nightmares about these whippings and the two best friends that he had as a youth. This is on the first page. And hiding in the forest, and he's wondering where are these coming from? Where, his previous life was filled with death and torture. What was it that prompted him? So his past, I think, is tormenting him, and he needs to find answers. And I think that's probably the prompt for going on this journey to find out who he is and what he is. And the question is, take him into the future.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I said Elaine and then Merle. Write it down. Elaine, did you speak before?
No, I didn't.
Okay. All right, Merle.
Okay, we were talking about where is he coming from? And I found something very interesting about him. It says all Gilgully's upper body strength he had acquired from years of crew and wrestling and
Right.
lacrosse in his renounced life at prep school and Princeton.
Very non-Jewish.
Right. And a person of privilege. And I think that was where his survivor's guilt was coming from. He was a person of so much privilege.
Yeah.
How is it that he was given that kind of a life and these Jews were absolutely suffering and destroyed? And then he makes a comment as he's using the rods, that his rods kept crossing his dividing rods to find the death. Israel is a land that devours its inhabitants.
Mm.
And I thought that was a very telling comment, that people who go to Israel are devoured in some way by the sad past of the Jews. So there's a lot of commentary in here about Jewish life in general.
For sure.
Absolutely. Alice.
Yeah, this goes to what a lot of you have said, but it almost seems like here this non-Jew, as you were just saying, Merle, very stereotypically waspish, was using all these, not stereotypes, but like Jewish tropes, like about the Holocaust and all these other things about what he thought it meant to be Jewish, but it was so inauthentic. I mean, to me, it was, I don't know. It obviously everything was, blown out of proportion and everything, but it just seemed like his search was based on not even like what I said, it's not so much stereotypes, but like these things that are thrown out, images of what it means to be a Jew, but it was, none of it was like really what it really does mean to be a Jew. So I guess that's what was so disturbing. He just was like searching in all the wrong places. Is there a song? Searching in all the wrong places? I think his search, I don't know, it seemed at the end, his search kind of turned up empty. I don't know if yeah.
I have Beverly, Terry, Judy, Lynn.
So it seems as if he was a Gentile, hiding, masquerading
Absolutely.
as a Jew to give a viewpoint of what non-Jews think, see,
Interesting.
and feel sympathy for the Nazis who were working so hard, and the supposed wretched Jews who are want to build this memorial and have no respect for hallowed ground. I think this was a Gentile, anti-Semitic point of view masquerading. I'm not talking about the author. I'm talking about the story.
Yeah.
Masquerading as a Jew to give insight to what he saw and kind of reports on in this story. And that's what I think.
Interesting. Terry,
Well, I think that's very interesting. I wanted to point out on page 275, there's a whole paragraph that deals with Soviet jewelry.
Jewelry, yeah.
Yeah.
And the weirdest thing is that I was once, where was I going? And someone said, "Oh, I wonder what you'll be able to bring back. Will you buy anything?" I said, "I'm not going to buy anything." And they said, "Well, you could probably buy Soviet jewelry." And I was hysterical because this person said it seriously. And I think this is such a satirical, that this whole thing is such a satire on what she was trying to portray. But at the end, it says they had a point after all, those lousy Germans. They weren't imagining things. The Jews were walking treasure chests. It took the fires of cremation to get them to give up their jewels once and for all, which is, it's just, I don't know. It really kind of gets you. It's really, really, the writing, I feel, she didn't hold back. I think she was
No.
really trying to make her point in a visceral way. I think she succeeded.
Judy, Lynn, and then Beverly. So
Um,
Judy.
I was surprised at how old she was. People our age love satire, understand satire, but not about the subject. And I was surprised that she was close to my age. I mean, she's 4 years older than me, 3 years older than me. I don't understand that. I don't understand how a woman in her 80s who must have known people, who must have heard stories of people, who respect these people, could find satire in this. Beverly, I thought what you said was brilliant. I love that perspective. It helps, but I don't understand how a woman in her 80s could say these words.
Interesting. Okay, I have Lynn, then Beverly, then Elaine.
So Beverly, I loved your interpretation too, but it brings up another question in my mind. Do we have a double satire going on here? Are we satirizing the Jews who think that putting on the trappings of Judaism make them Jews? Or are we satirizing non-Jews for all of their false feelings about what Jews are, their misapprehensions of what Jews are? Or is it both? I mean, is the satire a double-edged sword? Is it all the way around, talking about our religious, how we deal with religion personally and societally? And that's a question I'm asking people. I see
Yeah.
Beverly's finger going.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
right, Beverly's next, and then
So what
Elaine, and
the
then
other-
Merle, and then
Okay.
Susan.
So I'm thinking about this story, and it is really a story that needs a lot of interpretation. And the fact that whole thing about the jewelry and finding all this, what it meant, what it really meant was that the war against the Jews was very much an economic war. There was a lot of profit gained in businesses that were stolen, and art that was stolen, and jewelry that was stolen. I mean, the Jews were robbed. And so the discussion about all the things hidden in their bodies is a metaphor. And so it's a really hard story, because if you just read it as it is satirical, but it's really deep, and you have to, and excuse the metaphor, you have to dig in, to really understand, or try to understand what's going on. And I don't know what the end means, but I don't want to leave this discussion without discussing the shofar. So just want to say that.
The pun of digging in is obviously, but you have to. I have Elaine and then Merle's and Susan.
Okay, I don't really know if it's truly a satire. I think she is pointing out all the faults in human people, in the Germans, in the Ukrainians, in the Jews. I think in the rabbis. I mean, you can take it as a satire that it's funny, but it's not. Okay, I think that I think she's pointing out, and that's what made us so uncomfortable when we were reading it, that it's likely the truth in a lot of instances that we don't really want to face, but it's the truth. I mean, there were horrible things that people did, and I think it always makes you uncomfortable, and certainly the ending made us all very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
If you think about it, I'm sure the people of the villages did those horrible things, and you can't close your eyes and sugarcoat all this.
No, I agree. Merle.
Okay, so Macomb did a presentation a few weeks ago about people who had converted to Judaism, and
Oh, yeah.
remember that, and all the joy they felt and how they had studied, and it was a very inspiring presentation. Well, for Jacob Gilguli, he had to become a Jew in his mind. He fasted all day until sunset, concentrating his brainwaves on the mantras of the Jewish prayers, Shema Yisrael, Kaddish, Dayenu, and a few
Dayenu.
others, which he had memorized on the Shabbat in the meditation hall of a charismatic shepherd who gathered his flock of lost souls at the Western Wall. So just from memorizing a few prayers, he thought, oh, I'm Jewish now.
Right,
And
exactly.
I think she was satirizing people who think they're Jewish just because they learn a few prayers.
Absolutely.
I think the satire went both ways toward the
Right.
Gentiles.
Listen, I think she was also satirizing these people at the wall are very high pressure, and they've been there since the inception of the state. And when we were there in 79, they went after my husband, the then boyfriend. They never went after me. They went after these young men who may be lost and looking for something. And, here, the Shema, you're Jewish. So I found that, realistic. Susan.
Well, I've been listening to all of you, and I thank you so much for all your interpretations, because I will tell you, when I read this, I was completely confused. Maybe I'm not the intellect that I ought to be, but I thought, what on earth is this author getting at? What is going on here? And now you've told me. So I appreciate all your explanations, and I think I have to go back and read it again, even though it's going to be torture.
I think I could read it again.
Yeah. I remember to this day, and I was in college a long time ago, and I had a very good friend, and this really, after this discussion argument, it ruptured our friendship. She was studying German. Fine. And she wasn't Jewish, and she was dating a Jewish friend of mine. Okay. But the argument was, she goes, the Germans didn't know. There's no way they could know. And I was like, her name was Lynn. I go, Lynn, it stunk. That when there is a crematorium, it smells for miles and miles and miles. And and it's interesting because on Sunday, Bernie Birkin got up and said, we in America, he was the same age as the speaker. And he said, their lives were very parallel. I mean, obviously he got to stay here in the United States, but that the Jews here didn't know. And, that it's did people know? Did people not know? And that, that's
Vanessa, of course they knew.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been to 3 concentration camps and the towns are right there.
Right.
They knew. They
They-
could not, there's
they
no
could
way
not
they
know.
didn't
Right.
know.
anyway. Yeah. So, Lynn,
So I'm listening now, and I think I might have the answer to my question. I think she is satirizing all of us. Because if you turn to 263, there's a section here that I started to laugh at, and then I sort of shook my head and said, this is bad. This is when Shmuel Himmelhoch, who he says is a legendary man and guru, he went to see him. And at the bottom of the page, it says the first words that Himmelhoch spoke to him. Now, this is the legendary
Holy man.
holy man. The first words he spoke to him were in the form of numbers, 167277. This happened after months during which Gilguli sat in the cave at the feet of the sage 6 days a week, and not including the Sabbath, dredging up from his very depths all of his woes and longings and griefs that oppressed his heart and soul, to be answered only with a weighty silence laced with subtext. Gilguli did not immediately realize that when Himmelhoch uttered those first words, his intention was to pass on to his disciple his cell phone number.
I know, it's like unbelievably funny, really.
Unbelievable. I laughed, and then I said, oh my God, this guy is looking for solace and answers. And this is, with the implicit suggestion that Gilguli might save himself a trip and spare his donkey the rocky climb simply by telephone to continue his outpourings, even unburdening himself into the answering machine should he, Himmelhoch, not be available to take the call.
so at the wall 3 times a year at Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, they clean up all the notes. But like, you can fax the wall. You can, you can electronically put your notes in the kotel. And it's
Is that true?
oh, totally true. Yeah. It is a business. And here's
Well, can
another,
I ask what year that started? When
when
did
were
they start?
faxes? Years ago.
But pretty soon AI and chat bot will be.
I don't know why, but I tell you, that wounds me. And I know that's dumb, but
Right. The
it really hurts me. I didn't know.
yeah.
I wish I didn't know that.
right. There is a custom when people go to Israel you give them money and they become a messenger and it protects their trip, And so when people go to Israel and I see them, I know they're going, I give them $2, $5, $10. And I said, this is for tzedakah. And then I say, you're not supposed to say where to give it. I said, but I'm just going to tell you, please don't give this at the wall. Because these people are professional schnorrers, professional beggars, and that is their full-time job. And someone told me, because our congregation was just there, and I gave everybody a little, here's some money, and this guy just got totally roped in at the wall. And I said, I told you, I warned you. Then he goes, yeah, you were right. I said, I know. So this is also from a New York Times review. A send-up of Holocaust commemoration is an inherently dicey proposition. Even Mel Brooks made fun of only Hitler. He didn't joke about gas chambers and crematorias. But wait, on the back cover, this is for her book, there's a blurb from Cynthia Ozick, the novelist and literally conscious of the Jewish community, who compares Reich to Jonathan Swift.
I was thinking of the modest proposal when I read this.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that's fascinating. Alice and then Terry.
Yeah, so something you just said, Vanessa, in terms of, Jews, I mean, there's all kinds of Jews, there's all kinds of every kind of people. right? So you've got schnorrers at the wall, which is such a sacred place. So one of my takeaways from this story is that, yeah, it focused on Jews and what Jews went through the Holocaust and in the camps and the death camps and all that. But again, one of my takeaways is that, yeah, it was against the Jews, but it was against a person. And, that's what I feel that the Germans tried to do, was to take away the humanity
Right.
of Jewish people. And unfortunately, in some respects, they were successful, but fortunately, we survived. And I think that's the thing, is we're people. Yes, we're people that have certain religious beliefs, but we're people. And, anytime I hear about, and not just when I hear about racism, about slavery, they took away that's taking away the humanity of a person. Because if you do what you did to the Jews during the Holocaust, or what you did to Black people during times of slavery, and even now, if you do that to another person, how can you do that to another person? So what they do in their minds is they say, this isn't a person.
They dehumanize.
They dehumanize. And that's, I think that's my takeaway from the story.
Yeah.
Is that they completely dehumanize. And it's like they making fun. I have to say, when you said about the Jewish prayer, Shema, Israel, Kaddish, Dayenu, as far as I know, is not a prayer, right?
Right.
Isn't that what we sing?
It's a Passover song that everybody knows.
Exactly. But I'm saying that was like making fun of, Soviet jewelry. It's just like, everything was taking away from the humanity of Jewish people. That's
Can
Agreed.
I answer that?
Wait,
Vanessa?
I have Terry, then Lynn.
Okay.
Well, actually, this is to answer something that Lynn said a while back when you talked about the cell phone number. In spite of the fact that Himmelhoch said, this is my cell phone number, first of all, he was sure that even though he had a phone, that was him having a direct connection to God.
Right.
And secondly, he was insistent that this must have been, these numbers were the numbers that were tattooed on his arm in his past life. So regardless of what this basic charlatan was dishing out, he had his own, interpretation that he was sticking to, where he was feeling certain things, and he was quite certain, it seemed, that this is, what it really meant. And the other piece that I just noticed going through, it was the part I read before, but prior to that, it talked about the fact that the Germans had to declare the death camps off limits because it was incriminating evidence. And the final insult was handing it over to Polish soil to a Ukrainian. And they were primitive, as barbarians, animals, every last one of them. No one was damn good. So I think she's bringing in a lot of different conflicts between people that exist and did exist. And, negative kinds of othering, a lot of othering that's going on, that obviously still goes on today.
Lynn.
Okay, two things. First, to answer Terry. I think what the part you're talking about, where he wants to believe the number is the tattoo, and he wants to believe that this guy cares. I think these are his illusions about religion. It's what he really wants religion to be. And the story just is disillusioning to him as he sees everywhere along the way that this is not true. Alice, I think the commercialization of religion and the selling of objects and the digging up the earth so they can build a memorial so that they can get people to come so they get their money back. All of that commercialism is dehumanizing people.
Yeah. Right?
So to me, it's a the message is, unless we stop this kind of behavior and this emphasis on the material and technology with answering machines and, you know, cell phones, unless we're going to dehumanize ourselves, we're going to end up as automatons. So I think she says a lot in here. She says a lot. The only problem is it is just so hard to read. It's just really hard to read. And maybe that's what she wants. Maybe she wants us to be grossed out. I don't know.
Marcia, did you want to say something? Marcia. Rosenbaum?
Oh, no, I'm good.
Okay. Judy.
I have a question. Could she have done a satire trying to prove the points that we want to look at as satire, but made it palatable? Was this necessary to tell this story?
Yes.
Elaine.
Yes, I think it is. I think that we sometimes want to sugarcoat everything. And think of the discussion, think of all of the things that just in our small group have brought to light, and which we don't think of. And, you know, we want everything to be pretty and nice. And the world is not necessarily that way. And I think we could have another hour discussion on things and bring up more. I think sometimes it needs to be hit over the head. And I think this story hit us over the head.
I think that's a great way of putting it. And when we look back in modern history, and everyone on this call can remember, so right after the Holocaust, nobody talked about it. It was like it didn't happen, and people were very, very uncomfortable. And then I have talked to some survivors, and I really believe this. When I was in college in 1978, they had that mini series called The Holocaust, and it had Meryl Streep. It had all these famous people in it. And, you know, this is back in the dark ages. My whole dorm, because I was at the University of Michigan, everybody was Jewish. There was like probably 200 of us watching on a small little TV. We were watching this all together. And then people started talking about it. And my friend whose parents were survivors, they came to college and started talking to us. And every decade, another watershed event was when Oprah went with Elie Wiesel to Auschwitz. And she had an essay contest for people talking about the Holocaust, and it was open to everyone. And again, the same girlfriend, she was a reader of these essays. And it is, you know, now, so the pendulum has swung to not talking about it, to this over commercialization. You know, we have a beautiful Holocaust museum here in Skokie, and there's one in, of course, Washington, D.C. and Yad Vashem. And after the museum in Washington, D.C., I believe, set the standard for all museums all over the world, because they were the first to use interactive and different type of displays and video. And Yad Vashem had to close down and change. They totally revamped. It used to be kind of like a museum. Now, when you go, again, it's interactive. And that, you know, you've seen those rooms of shoes and eyeglasses. And they have that at the Holocaust Museum. They have that in Washington at Yad Vashem. And those things are so striking and hit you in your heart. And I was at Yad Vashem when my kid was in Israel, and it just fried him that I was the only parent there. I got there early, and the teacher and I were, talking, and it's like, Mom, I'm like, this is so interesting. And the teacher deferred to me a little bit because I'm an educator. But I said to this guy who I just thought was a fantastic teacher, I said, what is the difference between the Holocaust Museum on the mall and Yad Vashem? And he takes me to the very end and it looks out on Jerusalem. There's a window that you see Jerusalem. He goes, this is the difference. Here you can see what, where the Jewish people are today. And,
Wow.
you're right. Anyway, Merle.
I think she's writing a story about complete futility. This whole mission was futile. That people had said to him, you could go around with a sack on your head decorated all over with yellow stars like some kind of wizard, and you'd still never pass for a Jew. So that's a futile thing right there for him to try to pass as a Jew. And then the memorial itself is there to honor the dead, the noble concept of vicarious suffering, of sympathetic dying, to achieve the blessed state of becoming one with the dead. And he tries, he curls up in the ground. It's like you can just, it's like going back to the womb. I mean, it was so sad. He's lying there in the ground. He cannot achieve it because the suffering of the Jews during the Holocaust, it cannot be achieved.
Yeah.
You can't pretend you're one of them. You can go and look at it, but I think her story is one of complete futility. We cannot know the suffering of the Jews.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because every time you were so generous, Merle, because every time he did stuff like that, I'm like, he's crazy. It just made me think that I couldn't take anything he said seriously. But I think, as always, you all have shared your impressions of the story. I hope you liked it more as we go out. I certainly do. And in 2 weeks, we're going to read. I just had it there. It's a short story. Heaven is full of windows. And
Is it light and funny?
I don't think it's
Very, very short.
it's super short. And I'm wondering if we should do 2 stories.
Oh, no.
Okay.
You didn't say one thing about the shofar at the end.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, again, that's a herald. It's all messianic to me. The costume, the donkey, the shofar, it's all, for me, that's all messianic. And so the minute I see that, I cringe and discredit it because it's like, ew, no normal person does that. Is it nice to buy a shofar when you're in Israel? Yes, of course, great bar mitzvah present, but
Buying something. Buying something.
Right. It's a commercial. And I'll end with, there's no business like the show of business. I mean, it's business. It's a business. Look, what's happening. Look, I think it's going to be beautiful, but Violins of Hope at North Shore Congregation Israel.
Completely forgot. I realized I was on mute. Can I just ask one quick question?
Sure.
At the very end, when she is killing the pig and he hears the screams and then he goes running and he has this, was he hearing the screams of the pig and thinking that, was that like piquing his imagination and he thought something else was happening? I didn't really understand what was happening at that point, and
The only thing that
brought him to the point where he,
right. The only thing that I can tell you is, and I can't remember what country it was. It was either Cuba or it might have been Cartagena. I heard a pig being slaughtered. And the screams were unbelievable, unnerving. oh, it was the worst thing I had ever heard in my life. So if you've heard that scream, it does sound like a human. It does sound like,
So it could have triggered this.
yeah,
This
that's what I
reaction.
think. Because those screams are, Alice.
Vanessa, before we go, I don't know if you guys can all see this. but
Oh,
this was in the New York Times yesterday, a new generation of Holocaust storytellers.
can you save that for me, Alice? and
Yes, I
Brittany?
am. Yes, I'm saving for you. And also, it's written by a short story author. So
Who's
her
it written?
name is Daphne Kalotay, Kalotay.
Okay. I'll
So,
look.
yeah, that's why I tore it out to save for you, Vanessa. Yeah,
I thank you.
okay.
All right, thank you,
Bye all. Have a good
Bye.
week.
Thank you.
Vanessa,
Another great class.
Everybody. Thank you.
Vanessa,
Yes,
are you sending out emails?
yes, you're not getting it?
No. Could you make sure I'm on the list?
So I'm gonna go right now, but I'm 99.9. Can you check your,
Trash. John?
yes, thank you. Thank you, Lynn. I couldn't think of that. Can
Thank
you
you.
check?
Okay.
I am sending it out as, where is she? Joyce?
Yeah,
What's your email?
I'm gonna leave.
do it on Joyce Brodsky at Yahoo.
Okay, because I know we've had problems with Comcast.
I'm
Wait,
not
is-
on Comcast.
Right, that's what I'm checking. But I'm gonna check right now and I'll email you offline
Okay.
and I'll let you know. But thanks for
Thank you.
letting me know. All right.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody. Be well.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.